If these civilizations were hostile, we would have been shut down as a civilization in August of 1945 when we detonated the first atomic bomb. At the end of World War II under Operation Paperclip. Instead of him being hanged at Nuremberg, those guys, the geniuses, were brought over. And while he was on his deathbed in 1974, he said very directly, and I'm quoting, "They are hoaxing an alien threat to try to unite the world around sort of a totalitarian and rather fascist agenda, but it will trick and fool almost everyone." Look at where we are with just what we developed in the 40s and 50s with nuclear weapons. Now imagine technologies orders of magnitude more powerful at the basis of space-time being weaponized. We just did the scientific testing on something called the Booga sphere, and it's an extraterrestrial sphere about this big. That device we tested, it is 12,560 years old. People have this all backward. We're the threat. Humans, with the kind of technologies we have, we're the ones that are a threat to other worlds out there. So I would say 99.99999% of everyone in government, the public, the media, if they saw that thing, they would say it's alien, but it isn't. So see, the biggest part of the secrecy isn't the extraterrestrial part. The biggest part is what we have and what it's been used for.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end, my friends. And as always, I give all the praise, honor, glory, and thanksgiving to our God for that. Before I get into it, please subscribe. Birthday present for me. My birthday is May 27th, going to be 3/4 of a century. Can't believe that. But it's better than the alternative, right? Not having a birthday. It's all good. But my team is challenged. They said, you think we can reach 2 million subscribers by your birthday? We're very close. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. We'd appreciate it very much. You help us reach that goal. And we will repay you on a great YouTube Live that we're planning to do with all of you. So that's number one. And for those of you that have already subscribed, you know, I appreciate it. I always say this, I wouldn't have this platform if it wasn't for all my loyal viewers, and I appreciate you all very much. UFOs, extraterrestrials, you know, there's so much talk about, do they really exist? Is it a hoax? What's really going on? You know, if you ask me definitively, can I say that there are UFOs? The answer is I can't. Can I say there are ETs? The answer is I can't say that either. Do I tend not to believe it? I don't really believe it because I haven't seen it, and there really hasn't been any evidence to this point that they really exist. We've heard from people in the military and so on and so forth. Okay, but we haven't seen one. We haven't talked to one. We haven't seen one of those spaceships or, you know, aircraft, whatever you want to call them. But I have a very interesting guest today. You might have heard him before, but he calls himself a UFOologist, meaning he's an expert in the study of UFOs. His name is Dr. Stephen Greer. He's an American UFOologist, a retired physician and author, and a very prominent figure in the UFO disclosure movement, meaning that he wants it to be disclosed. He's been on a couple of platforms. I found his information very interesting, fantastic, I would say. Am I convinced at this point? I can't say I am. You know, this is subjective. You can listen to him. I let him talk. You know, he had a lot to say. He's very knowledgeable and learned in this area, of course. I have a lot to say. He has a lot to say. What you're going to hear is going to be controversial. Some of you are going to say, come on. And some of you are going to say, yeah, I believe that. What he says kind of makes sense in a lot of ways. I ask him straight out about a couple of things. You're going to hear what he has to say. But I want you to stay till the end, listen to what I have to say in the end about this, and then make up your own mind. You know, is this real? What he did say, and this was fascinating, that right now it's Donald Trump that stands in the way of a possible calamity happening in the next couple of years involving a very covert operation that's going to possibly fake an alien invasion on the entire human race. Very, very interesting. Listen to what he has to say about it, and then you're going to arrive at your own conclusions, do your work. He has a website you can look into. He's wrote a couple of books. But to me, this was very, very fascinating. So with no further delay, my very special guest, UFOologist, or ufologist, I should say, Dr. Stephen Greer. All right, Dr. Greer, really a pleasure to sit down with you. I've been looking forward to this. It's a uh, tremendous, I don't want to say controversy, but, UFOs. We've been hearing about them for years. A lot of people say they exist. Many people say they don't exist. And really excited to talk to you about it because you are a world renowned expert on this. And so I've got some questions. I want to start off with this, something that happened recently with our former president. In a February 2026 podcast interview with Brian Tyler Cohen, Barack Obama addressed aliens, terrestrials in a lighthearted lightning round of questions. When asked directly, are aliens real? He responded, they're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in, what is it, Area 51. There's no underground facility unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the President of the United States. Was
Right.
Barack Obama right on point, or what's going on with that statement?
Well, and that wasn't as important as, and it's good to meet you too, by the way, what President Trump said subsequently to that, as you know, where he then ordered an executive order for the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, to get to the bottom of it and release all the secret information. So let's unpack that.
Okay.
So I'm an emergency trauma doctor, medical doctor, but I've been doing briefings for folks like the director of the CIA and putting briefings together for the president since I first met with the director of the CIA for President Clinton in December 1993, almost 33 years ago. So we've been providing this information to the executive, the president, and to Congress and other people over the years, and we have definitive proof of it. It's not speculation if they exist. But the problem is, and this is the part of it that's very disconcerting, is that the reason I was asked to go up from North Carolina, where I was practicing as a emergency and trauma guy, to brief Clinton CI directors, because the president and his CI director had made inquiries into this issue, and they knew there were covert operations related to it, and they were lied to and denied access. So at that point, I realized that this was an unconstitutional and criminal organization that would make the mafia look like nothing. All right. So I'm going to be very blunt here. We established in 1993 that the programs related to this were unconstitutional and were committing treason. So this has been a huge struggle for 33 years. I left my medical career to fix this problem. But when Obama said that, you have to remember he's a lawyer. So you have to think how lawyers would parse words. He said that he knew they existed. Well, how did he know that? We had put together the briefing for him. I did. And so he had all that evidence, but from an external non-governmental source, right? Because my organization is the world's expert team on this globally. There's not a close second. And so what happened is that he said he knew they existed, but he didn't see anything as president because he was
Right.
denied access. Now, remember John Podesta, who was the chief of staff for Bill Clinton and later put together the Obama cabinet and all of that. He also had tried to get to the bottom of it as a sort of a right-hand consigliere for President Obama, never got anywhere. And in fact, when he left to run Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016 against Mr. Trump, he said his biggest regret in being in government for all those decades was never being able to effect disclosure on the UFO issue. So this is a very serious problem. And he's like, well, if that's true, and it is, we can prove it in a court of law or anywhere else. What are they hiding?
My friends, let me ask you something. How does it make you feel knowing that some of these AI apps, they have people from the intelligence world sitting on their boards, where they're collecting your thoughts, your questions, your fears, even your secrets. You're pouring your life into these chats and trusting they'll never be used against you. For a guy like me, that doesn't sit right. I grew up in a world where information was power, and the idea that your late night questions to an AI are tied directly to your identity and potentially visible to corporations or governments, well, that should make you think twice. It sure makes me think twice. That's why I use today's sponsor, Venice. Venice runs some very powerful open source models for text, code, images, and video right in your browser or app, and it also lets you access the world's leading models, things like ChatGPT 5.2, Claude 4.5, Gemini Flash, Sora 2 Pro, and Nano Banana, and they're all done anonymously. Venice submits requests on your behalf, so what you ask, it isn't tied to who you are. Your conversations are encrypted and they're stored only on your device. Nobody's building a dossier on you, nobody's monetizing your private thoughts, and it's founded by Eric Voorhees, and he's a longtime crypto and privacy advocate who really actually cares about this stuff. If you value free inquiry and independent thinking, and you want to see me using it myself, check out venice.ai/Franzese and use code Franzese for 20% off a real good pro plan. Now that's an offer you shouldn't refuse.
And that's what you have to understand. So there are actually three things being mixed all together as UFOs and aliens. Most of it's nonsense, frankly. The part of it that's real is mind-blowing. So the majority of these objects that you see are actually man-made anti-gravity or electrogravitic craft. My uncle, he worked his whole career at Northrop Grumman, big aerospace company, and was on the team that designed the lunar module, put the first man on the moon. That was my mom's oldest brother on that team. But we also know from Lockheed Skunk Works and Raytheon, and remember, I now have 750 whistleblowers who've been in the CIA and Department of Defense and these big corporations that have come on the record. And in fact, a lot of it's in the president's briefing document. You can look at this thing. This is available to anybody who wants it, right? Online now at drstephengreer.com. And we've redacted sensitive information out of it, certain tactical information and certain names that have to be redacted, but the public can get this. We've never published one until now because we know what's about to come out. The executive order the president has issued makes it clear the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, has to get to the bottom of this and release those files. Now, the problem is, you would think that if you're Secretary of Defense or President, you order a review and you get all the information. That's not how it works. The only way the President and Secretary of War is going to get to the bottom of this is because of the assets we have provided over to them and other people who we have in the system giving them information. Because the fact that you have a very senior member of the military, the most senior, he's the civilian head of the Pentagon, doesn't mean anything because we've been through this for now 30-some years. For example, I briefed the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is basically like the CIA for the military, and a 3-star general back some years ago. And he had been denied access to this totally, but he knew there were activities going on. That is your very definition of insubordination and treason, right? So this is a very serious issue. And the fact is, the reason it's so secret is that there have been covert programs using man-made UFOs doing criminal enterprises since the late 50s and early 60s. Now, there's maybe 20% of the ones that people see are actually of extraterrestrial origin. And we know how to distinguish between the two. And the third category that's being put out there as alien are what they call extra-dimensional. It's an unusual phenomenon that comes from another dimension, but it's not extraterrestrial and it's not man-made, except in some cases. It's a covert program staging as alien using technology that kind of like stages some weird, creepy thing from another dimension. So the issue is way more complicated than anyone can imagine. And the science behind it is very complex because you're dealing with, let's just say anybody at MIT or Harvard or Caltech is about 5,000 years behind the technology curve of what's been discovered at my uncle's old company, Northrop Grumman, or Lockheed Skunk Works. So the technology, by studying extraterrestrial vehicles from the mid-40s to now, there are extraordinary technologies that would be an incredible benefit to humanity, but they've never come out. And let me explain why. If you look at those videos and CNN, Fox, all this stuff of these objects flying, like the Tic Tac, they call it the Tic Tac, that are jets were chasing off the coast of California. Remember, that was a Lockheed Skunk Works device. Now, the jet pilots thought it was alien. I said, nope, no, sir. I talked to the F-18 Hornet. That's one of ours. We have images of it from 1967, and they're in this book. So this book is a whole expose, and it's all the crash retrievals where we have used electromagnetic weapons to down these objects, retrieve them, and then studied and reverse engineered the technology. That's been going on for 80 years. So you can imagine what the technology curve looks like. It was starting like this, and then it's going like that. And so they can hoax a lot of things and say it's alien. For example, the Psychological Warfare Division at the Pentagon have been using those craft with certain other technologies to stage alien abductions and mutilations and all that. And we have a CIA document that states that. It flat out says, it's a 1985 document saying that they were using this advanced technology as the euphemism to stage alien abductions for its psychological warfare purpose. Why? Well, because they want people to be afraid of another bogus enemy so that they can establish a global totalitarian superstate and get trillions of dollars from not just the United States, but from the whole world to fake, to fight a fake enemy that doesn't exist. This is the biggest hoax ever that has been perpetrated on the public. And that's why I say about 90% of the information out there on this subject is rubbish. I mean, or it's been staged for as a disinformation campaign. So the part of it that's real, and this is where you do need a guide through this wilderness. And I spoke, I won't say who, but to one of President Trump's prior national security advisors from his first term, who told me point blank, we were never told anything about this subject. This guy had been a very high official in the military and intelligence community in the United States. And he says, no, neither I in that position nor as national security advisor to the president were ever told anything about this. I said, well, that doesn't surprise me. So it's like a parallel covert program, but they've used probably 8 to 10, $12 trillion in our funding over the last 60, 70 years on this. And so, but the benefit to humanity, think about this for a minute. The technology's running those devices, they're not using oil, rockets, jets, nuclear, wind, solar. That technology comes out, will replace all those systems with so-called free zero-point energy that would run your house and car with no power bill. And it would be, within 20 years, there'd be no pollution on the planet and no poverty. But you're going to have to transition out of $1,000 trillion in assets. And you're going to have to retire the power grid. You're going to have to retire all the oil, gas, and coal, and nuclear. These fake little plug-in Tesla cars. You're not going to need those because you're going to have to plug these in. Because the way these things are running, there's no payload of fuel on them. They're pulling energy from the fabric of space around it, which has been quantified back in the 50s as the zero-point energy field. And that is how they're running. We understand the physics of it very well. And that disclosure would transform humanity and really would usher in a golden era, a golden age for humanity.
All right, my friends, I guarantee you have never tasted anything like this wine. I don't care what you've been drinking. I know French wine, Italian wine, Napa Valley. I don't care. This grape is 6,200 years old. It's been growing in the same soil since before the pyramids were built. One sip of my Irene, and you're going to look at every other bottle of wine differently. I guarantee it. FriendsEastWine.com. So, Doc, who's behind this covert operation to use aliens for the purpose you just described? Who would it be?
Oh, well, they're sort of a consortium of corrupt people in corporate, financial, and military and intelligence programs, and we know who they are.
And powerful enough to keep it away from the president and certain people in Congress and
absolutely,
people in other high places.
I can tell you with high confidence that when President Kennedy was pushing to get to the bottom of this, that's why they killed him. I know exactly who and how that was ordered. James Jesus Angleton III, who was the fanatical leak stopper and mole hunter at CIA back then, he also arranged for the assassination of Marilyn Monroe. because she was going to tell the public what Kennedy knew about this. And I have a top secret document that's a wire transcript signed by him, James Jesus Angleton III, of Marilyn Monroe threatening to hold a press conference to tell the whole world what Jack Kennedy had told her about all this. And it's a legit document, and I have released that document. Now, people say, how can you release things that are stamped top secret? Let me be clear, and this is why I'm going to make an appeal to your listeners. These programs, because they're being run illegally, they can't use the National Security Act and the law to keep it secret. That's their Achilles heel. You can't break the law and then use a contract, a non-disclosure agreement, or a top secret clearance to keep that illegal operation secret. This is basic constitutional law, and I've run this by several constitutional attorneys who agree 100%. So this is why I keep making an appeal. Anyone listening who's worked on these programs, we can protect you. You will not be prosecuted. And now we have senior law enforcement and people in the national security system on the side of disclosing all this that we can put you in touch with, right? And we can surveil anyone who would threaten you. I'm just saying, I won't say how. We can make sure that if you come forward, there's a net around you, and we will be able to know if anyone's going to threaten you. So we're now making an appeal for another whole wave of whistleblowers to come forward right now, because the president wants this to get released fairly soon, and Mr. Hegseth needs a lot of help. I'll tell you right now, he will not get straight answers through the system.
So what you're saying, you're pretty confident that what's really behind the Kennedy assassination and Marilyn Monroe was his probing to find out what was really going on with this whole UFO program, if we'll call it.
Yeah, if to give you a little more detail, President Eisenhower was the last president to have constitutional control over these programs. And what happened in the late 50s, in his second term, he was in favor of disclosing this information and doing a release of the technologies that would transform the world. But there were industrialists, the industrial part of the military-industrial complex, that said, oh, no, you're not. And we're talking people like Alan Dulles and Paul Mellon and all kinds of folks. And so they kind of circled their limousines, and then they blocked the president from knowing any more what they were doing. We have a whistleblower who was a young Army guy in the White House with Eisenhower, who later became an attorney, a lawyer, that we have on record saying, yes, the president, Eisenhower, told him that he had been pushed away. And so President Kennedy knew that had happened, and he was trying to fix it. And he was going to do an executive order that would have very much released this, and also trim back the abuses at the agency, the CIA, which has been at the core of it. Not all the CIA, but a very compartmented operation. And Marilyn Monroe, she didn't realize what kind of monster she was wrestling with, right? She thought she could hold a press conference, tell this story that from having her affair with Jack Kennedy, kind of pillow talk, and she would do that and nobody would do anything to her. No, they killed her, and they made it look like an overdose, but it was a hit. What they call wet works. Wet works are a term for assassination, targeted killings. And I've had a few people on my team killed over the years, and threatened, and certainly I have. But I'm not afraid. It's fine. Make my day. I'll be more trouble.
Do you know who?
I have a whole system in place. If I die, the stuff that's going to hit a blockchain part of the internet they don't want that to happen. I'll just say that.
You know where the threats came from?
Yeah, we do. And
You do.
it's nice. In the last few years, I've had senior federal law enforcement approach me, as well as senior people in the military. And they call themselves the have-nots. It's very funny. I mean, these are like some of the top people. They say, we're tired of being the have-nots. We want to know what's going on with this. So I have terabytes of data. And if you get on our website, drstephengreer.com, you'll see a link to our archive. Now, there's part of it that's redacted, but a lot of it isn't. And there's, a huge amount of material. And so I started turning over everything to the Senate Intelligence Committee, House Oversight Committee, and people in federal law enforcement and military guys a number of years ago. Now they've actually realized the extent of the problem, and they're really aware that there are criminal activities, and those are being actively pursued and actively investigated by very top. I mean, it's a covert investigation, obviously, because of sensitivity. So I have to wear a hat, two hats. I'm in the public eye, but I'm also doing these things privately. I want to emphasize I'm not I've never been paid by the government or a contractor. My group is totally volunteer. We won't take money from a big corporation and it's all, we crowdfund everything and people support us by providing us with funding. So I left my medical career when I realized that if we don't push on this, we're going to get into a very bad situation where at some point they could hoax some sort of an alien attack on the planet, and it would fool the president, it would fool people in the Pentagon. So, these are madmen. It's sort of like that, the mad scientists that were, in that, what was that early 60s movie with I forget, Stanley Kubrick's movie. But, and you have these people
You
who
mean
are
the War of the
brilliant.
Worlds?
Yeah,
The-
and
the
well,
War
the
of the Worlds.
closest thing to it, did you ever see Independence Day,
Oh
the
yeah,
movie? Well,
absolutely.
that is from CIA scripting right there, where the whole world gets united around a threat from outer space. And it makes for a nice science fiction film, but it's nonsense. One of the things that, a number of members of Congress I'm working with have said publicly, since we've been providing information, is that if these civilizations were hostile, we would have been shut down as a civilization in August of 1945 when we detonated the first atomic bomb. So, the idea, civilizations that advance, that are moving through other dimensions from point A to B in the cosmos, and you're not doing it at the speed of light. You're actually dropping out of linear space-time and reappearing. It's like quantum entanglement, what's called quantum entanglement, but on a macro scale, a whole spacecraft, and almost like a teleport system. And we know how the physics of that works, by the way. And if you have that kind of technology in the 40s, and they saw us exploding atomic and then thermonuclear bombs and going into space, right? The early space program. If they were hostile, they would just shut our civilization down. We'd be a charcoal floating through space, is what Congressman Burchett of the House Oversight Committee said. But they can control the masses through fear. Think of what demagogues do. Hitler did it. Religious people do it. Ayatollahs do it. All kinds of people do it. They use fear to try to manipulate political leaders, but also the media and the masses. And it works. I mean, it's a very effective. So I think that's been the long-term agenda. I don't know if you remember who Werner von Braun was. He invented the rocket
No.
for Adolf Hitler. So Werner von Braun, the early V-2 rockets that were being
Yeah.
flown over into Britain in World War II, the guy who invented that is the most famous rocket scientist in history, Werner von Braun. And he was brought over to the United States to become at the foundation of our space program at the end of World War II under Operation Paperclip, where they put a paperclip on a file. So instead of him being hanged at Nuremberg, those guys, the geniuses, were brought over. And while he was on his deathbed in 1974, and his right-hand assistant, who's on my team now, Carol Rosin, he said very directly, and I'm quoting, they are hoaxing an alien threat to try to unite the world around sort of a totalitarian and rather fascist agenda. And he says it's all a lie. And yet, if you look at what's going on with people who have been trying to hijack our disclosure efforts, they're operatives, they're called NOCs, non-official cover, that are in the UFO research community and all over the place talking about that it's a threat. Well, in reality, the only threat that we have to the world are ourselves. And these civilizations are here to help and understand and wait for us to grow up a little bit and get out of our rambunctious adolescent psychosis and become a mature civilization. So that's
You know,
really
Doug,
Yep.
I got to tell you what's fascinating about this, and I know there's no connection, but maybe there is. When you look at the Epstein files and
Oh
we
yeah.
hear that there is a group or a conclave of people that wield more power than, any president or any
Yep.
dictator or anything else, and they really control what's going on in the world. And
Correct.
obviously, I believe there's a big cover up with the whole Epstein thing, and those
Oh,
names will
there is.
never come out. Is it? I mean, do these people cross paths at all? Are they one and the same? Is this one really big, uh, you know, conspiracy out there by a group of people that are just basically untouchable?
Well, it's compartmented. So when you start getting into these sort of operations, you have compartmented operations. So most people, the left hand doesn't know the right hand exists. That's how this works. Now, at the top, there are a handful of people that are read in fairly high up. Former Vice President Dick Cheney was one of those. George H.W. Bush was. Clapper and Brennan are. We know who some of them are. I've met with a number of them over the years. Back in the day when I first started this in 1992, the head of Army Intelligence and Special Forces, General Stubblebine, offered me personally $2 billion not to do what I'm doing and to become part of that group. That's a true story. So I rejected it because I said, no, I'm not for sale, and I'm not going to get corrupted by your weird little bunch of cultish goose-stepping nut jobs, which is what they are. They're sociopaths and psychopaths. Most of them, not the guys, not the rank and file working in the programs. I want to make a distinction.
Hmm.
I'm working with guys who are at black sites, covert sites out west currently, and they're on the teams that man the using electromagnetic weapons to knock down ET craft and then retrieve them. I've been in their choppers. I've been over their facility. I've seen the tech, how they do it. I have images of the underground bases where they take that equipment, both man-made and extraterrestrial, and we know where they are. If you get on our archive, you'll see it's about 150 some black sites we have on a map, and some of them we have the exact GPS coordinate for how you go underground. So that's all been turned over to the White House and to the Pentagon and the Director of National Intelligence and the Senate Intelligence Committee, et cetera. So we very transparently are now handing over everything we have.
Well, let me ask you this: if these spacecraft or whatever you want to call them, that
Mm.
a lot of military sightings we've heard over the years,
Oh yeah,
they had to be created by Grumman or Boeing or some of these companies
yeah.
without the knowledge of certain people in the United States, and these were privately ordered aircraft.
Well, it involves a lot of criminal activity that generates revenue, drug running, human trafficking, et cetera, and the embezzlement of covert monies out of the Pentagon budget and the intelligence budget. Let me give you an example.
Well, let me
My
tell you,
uncle,
that's not hard to believe when you hear how much money is unaccounted for in the
yes,
Pentagon. I mean,
oh,
they have no
it's
clue.
trillion. It's true.
Yeah.
We have on tape Rumsfeld the day before 9/11 saying that there were $2.3 trillion. This is 25 years ago, unaccounted for, missing in the Pentagon. We know now it's 8 or 12 trillion. Well, this is where it's
Yes.
been going. Well, let me give you a little example. My uncle's old company, Northrop Grumman, builds a B-2 Stealth, right? They'll charge the U.S. government $2 billion a copy, and they actually cost maybe 100 million, 150 million. The rest of that money goes out the back door into these programs, making triangular shaped anti-gravity UFOs, etc. Same thing at Lockheed Skunk Works. The president of Lockheed Skunk Works, on his deathbed, told a member of my team who is a renowned aerospace historian, James Goodall, and he was within a week of dying. He said, look, we have all this, anything you can imagine that you've seen on Star Trek, the Lockheed Skunk Works have already developed, and it's out there, not at Area 51, out in the desert with the Lockheed Skunk Works facilities underground, and I know where they're opening, how to get there, and it's fully developed. Now, this was in 1995, 31 years ago, when Ben Rich was on his deathbed. Now, you can imagine in the following 30 years how far that's advanced. But when that's not under the control of the knowledge of the people, the people's representatives, the Congress, or the president, that is an existential threat to human civilization. This is what we're telling. This is a very hard thing for the president and Congress to get their minds around, which we have been the Paul Revere's warning of this for 35 years now. Now it's luckily this president is really understanding the depth of the problem. And there are certain other people. I think the director of national intelligence is now awakening, but excuse my language, but my military guys I'm working with that are my liaisons there, they're all, he says, in the senior ranks, they're all having an oh shit moment. They're having, oh my God, this is all real. So it's a worst case scenario in many ways. It's a very good scenario if this can come out in a graduated, the technologies, if they were to come out gradually, first the energy generating ones, and once it's safe to the things that fly. Now, let me give you an idea. In this book, we have one of the cases, and just one case, is a Marine guy who was dispatched to the earthquake and tsunami disaster in Indonesia in 2009. And he and his platoon came across a man-made UFO from Lockheed, Skunk Works, 300 feet in diameter. And they were loading onto that thing humans crated up in containers that would be used in human experimentation. True. So it's gruesome, some of this. And that thing, when it took off, it lifted up and went over the horizon in 1 or 2 seconds, 100,000, 200,000 miles per hour, without a sonic boom, because they create an envelope, an electromagnetic envelope that cuts through the air without making them clap back together, which is what thunder is or a sonic boom is. So the technology, and that is human. So I would say 99.99999% of everyone in government, the Congress, the public, the media, if they saw that thing, they would say it's alien, but it isn't. So see, the biggest part of the secrecy isn't the extraterrestrial part. The biggest part is what we have and what it's been used for. So that's what we're trying to stand down, disclose it properly. Now, there are certain people like Bob Bigelow of Bigelow Aerospace is now closed, who's whispering to the president, "Oh, just do a partial disclosure. Don't tell people the truth." And because I don't work for the government, I'm going to say, no, we're not going to do a fake BS partial disclosure. And if that happens, I'll be everywhere saying, well, they're leaving out the most important part, and that's the human part. Because one of the agendas is to try to create a boogeyman enemy out of, the extraterrestrials in space. And who would that benefit? The same military industrial criminals that have been ripping us off for 80 years, right? So this is not the way to do it. Now, whether President Trump and the Secretary of War Hegstaff, how they navigate this, because there are big competing interests. There are people saying you cannot disclose what we have, humans have. And I've talked to several members of Congress. When they started looking into that part of it, they were told, your life could be at risk if you look into that. And these are people.
I was going to say, what luck is Trump going to have? I mean, again, I compare it to Epstein. There are people telling him you can't release certain things and it won't be released. This sounds like the same situation. He'll make an effort, he'll try, but nothing's going to come of it, most likely.
Well, he has enough information that he can do whatever he chooses to do. I'll just say he now, I won't say more than just to say he understands what we have and what's extraterrestrial. Now, whether he'll disclose that, because a lot of people have told me who are in special forces arenas and special operations, they go, well, they don't want to tip their hand that we have these advanced technologies because that's our little secret card to play. And I said, yeah, but unfortunately, the cat's out of the bag, because there have been too many people come forward, like this Marine and other whistleblowers, who have said that was our equipment being manned by kind of former special forces guys who are mercenaries working for these corporations. And so, sorry, but and be honest with you, this whole operation dealing with UFOs is the world's largest RICO, racketeering influence corrupt organization. And the 1970 RICO law that was passed to take down the mafia, this is what is now being utilized to take this down. And we've recommended that, and now it's happening. I won't say anything more, but it has been concluded in law enforcement circles that this is a RICO operation.
It's fascinating. Let me ask you this. Now that you've, let us know about the covert side of this, what about the real UFO side? What do you have
Yep.
like hard, factual, definitive evidence that these UFOs or aliens have visited this earth and they've been seen by people?
Oh, sure. I mean, we have. I've got a dissection of an ET on a slab from 1920s that we have in our archive. You can go look at it. We have photographs of the bodies. We have multiple people on my team that are whistleblowers that are on the retrieval teams that have retrieved the bodies and handled them alive and dead. So yes, absolutely. So we know that there are, I don't know, by now over 1,000 extraterrestrial vehicles have been shot down and retrieved, and the bodies are in storage. We know where that is. So no, this is no doubt. The problem is the public, and until I went into the SCIF, the Secure Compartment Information Facility, that's where top secret information is exchanged for the Senate Intelligence Committee. No one on the Senate Intelligence Committee or their senior staff, one of whom I met with would be like a 3-star general if he'd still been in the military. They didn't even know we had ours, and they didn't know there was a difference between an ET, alien craft, and a man-made one. They didn't know that where these underground bases were, and that there were connector systems between the Edwards complex and the Nellis Air Force Base complex and the Dugway proving grounds up in Utah. Now, we've mapped all that out for them now, but this has been a very steep, I call it disclosure PTSD. And you can only imagine a guy like me walks in and hands this sort of stuff off and the proof of it. And then they send investigators out and confirm everything we've said. And your life just got turned upside down. So it is a bit of future shock here. But yeah, the ETs are, well, last time I had a guy who was doing this way back in the 60s. He's passed away, Sergeant Stone. He was on a retrieval team, retrieving the bodies and the ET craft and stuff. And he said at that time they had cataloged 69 different extraterrestrial species from different star systems. So it's not just, I mean, the whole things you see in the movie of the one big bug-eyed one or the gray one or the little green men, that's all nonsense.
What do they look like? I mean, if you've seen them,
Yeah.
do they compare to humans at all? I mean, did they have a totally different structure, a different body? What do they look like?
Well, they have a head, 2 arms, and 2 legs, and that's where the similarities pretty much stops. There are some species that could be our first cousins or look like they are. There are others that are very different. Some have an exoskeleton outside instead of an endoskeleton like our bones, inside. Some have a single heart-lung organ instead of we have a separate set of lungs and heart. I know the details on this, and none of them are hostile. Although some people, like the appearance of one more than the other, but I mean that's just whatever.
Well,
I mean,
why do you think? Why do you think they wouldn't be hostile? I mean, we have we have people here on this earth that are very hostile. Whenever they came by, do you think they came by just as an exploratory,
oh no.
reason? Why do you think they even came around the earth?
Well, I think they've been around a long time. I
Well, they'd
don't
have
think.
to be technologically, I think they'd have to be more advanced than we are because I don't think
Oh,
we've traveled outside of this galaxy to find out if there's
oh, they're
extraterrestrials.
they're orders of magnitude more developed than we were when all this started. Now, since we've spent trillions of dollars studying their own tech, we're getting pretty far along, which is dangerous because it's not under any control by the president and Congress. And by the way, these same organization have operations in China, Russia, all over the world. So it's not just we know one of the triangular craft were confirmed operating out of Russia, and one went into northern Iran and crashed and had to be destroyed right there on the ground. So we have that information, and that's also been turned over to congressional and White House folks. Um, but no, those civilizations. Here's the analogy. Look at where we are with just what we developed in the 40s and 50s with nuclear weapons, right? It's called mutual assured destruction. So if we were to go into a full-out nuclear war, it would destroy all human life and civilization.
Right.
Now imagine technologies orders of magnitude more powerful at the basis of space-time and matter being weaponized. So if you are of the consciousness of violence and hostility, you're going to destroy your own world before you ever get out of your solar system. So I wrote a paper in 1991 called The Evolutionary Selection of Non-Hostility in Interstellar Civilizations. If you are that advanced in your technology, you're not talking about, laser beams and bows and arrows. You're talking about a technological knowledge that if you were to use it against and in a battle, let's say you had two warring, I know Star Wars and all that is entertaining, but in reality, those technologies will result in the dissolution of both planets like that. No, if people don't understand the physics of this, we do. Think of quantum entanglement, where every point in space and time is instantly interrelated at that level. Now imagine a weapon at that level. That weapon could take the Earth and turn it into a pink mist floating through space. So, no, if they were hostile, they would have destroyed themselves or each other before they found us. So this is, I've often said when I went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, years ago in 1993 to meet with the people who were in charge of what was called it used to be the Foreign Technology Division of the Air Force, and that's where the early UFO materials were sent to be studied. And this was, of course, 50 years later. But I said, look, if these guys were hostile, you wouldn't be breathing the free air of Earth. It'd be done. We'd be over. Now, it doesn't say that they're not concerned about our hostility and they're monitoring. This is why they're monitoring our nuclear capabilities and they're monitoring our space programs. Because those civilizations want to be sure we don't make too much trouble out in the universe, before we grow up and become a peaceful species. But we're obviously not there yet. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. So, we're still fighting over religious ideas and a few scraps of land like in Ukraine and this and that. So we're not exactly the most trustworthy species out there. The problem is, while we have very advanced covert technologies, we have not evolved socially and spiritually in a parallel way. In other words, our technology is way ahead of our social and spiritual development, and that's when a civilization such as ours is dangerous to ourselves. We're dangerous to others. As an emergency doctor, if someone came in crazy and dangerous to themselves or others, they'd be committed, right?
Yeah.
I fill paperwork and they go off to the loony bin and get committed involuntarily. But I think right now the human species has enormous potential right now, but we're also a little bit nutty in how we're running this planet. And the other thing they're concerned about is the biosphere. And I want to be clear about this. We have not needed fossil fuels or nuclear power since before I was born. And I'm no spring chicken. I'll be 71 in June. So here's the problem. They're watching this, and those civilizations have been around since the dawn of human history or before. I don't know if you know this. We just did the scientific testing on something called the Buga sphere, B-U-G-A. It was found in Colombia. And it's an extraterrestrial sphere about this big that got near a power line and shorted out. And now a friend of mine in Mexico City has it. That device we tested, it is 12,560 years old.
Wow.
We carbon dated it from some resin material around in some of these little portals around the center, like the equator of this sphere. And it's an anti-gravity free energy device, and it's now in civilian hands. So we're trying to do the studies on this. We've done CAT scans, we've done the metallurgy, and if your viewers just look up Buga sphere, B-U-G-A sphere. I was just addressing 8,000 people at their national auditorium in Mexico City about this. And that's the most astonishing physical artifact ever recovered that covert programs haven't stolen and taken into their possession. Now, when I was there with a member of Congress, Congressman Burleson, in June of this past year, about 9 months ago, there was someone who tried to break into the vault and steal it. And we've identified that person as somebody who works for the criminal cartels, although he was embedded with the federal police of Mexico. So we know that this is a very high value artifact. But all
Let
of a
me,
sudden, they're
yeah,
all flying around. I mean, there have been, we have 11 or 12 videos of these things. Now, only one of them became malfunctioned when it got bumped up against the power line and landed. So that's the one we have.
So are they information gathering objects, possibly? Have you be able to determine that and maybe gathering
Yeah.
information from these ETs?
It's a little ominous, but I think they're all getting activated right now because they're sensing a geophysical instability.
Let me
They're
ask
on,
you this:
they're on autopilot.
has there been any communication? Have they communicated verbally or whatever way they communicate with anybody here to tell us about them, or where they exist, where they came from, anything? Has there been any
Yeah, well,
communication that you know of?
yeah, there's been quite a bit actually, and I head up a team that is sort of a ambassador-oriented team to these. It's called Close Encounters CE5 Contact. So you can go to your app store and get the CE5 Contact app, and it's a whole training program. We just released a movie called CE5: The New Frontier in Contact. And we have had astonishing experiences. If you look at that movie, it's just been released on Amazon and Apple and I don't know where else. You will see, and my assistant can send you the link if you haven't seen it.
Please do. Yeah.
And it's an amazing document. It's about an hour and 10-minute documentary, but it goes through how we do this and what we're doing. Now, I've been doing this with groups of people since 1990. And we have had craft come right in. We've had ET beings come very near where we are out in remote places that we have photographs of. It's pretty amazing. People go, really? I go, yeah. So one of the things we're recommending in the executive orders that I drafted for the president is that we're doing this as a civilian, non-official effort. But what we really need is to have our State Department and other foreign ministries around the world figure out, how do we communicate, make contact with these civilizations instead of just shooting them down with an electromagnetic weapon, right? We need to take this entire crazy way we've been handling this for 80 years and do something intelligent with it. And I am certain that those civilizations want to do this, because when we set up the right conditions. Now remember, how are they communicating? Well, there's a problem. Everyone thinks we're myopic. Humans are very fixed in our little box. But you're not going to use like we're communicating at the speed of light here, right? You and
Yeah.
me right now. But at the speed of light, I mean, one of the civilizations we had contact with was an ET group from the Andromeda Galaxy. It's 2.5 million light years from here. So at the speed of light, it would take 2.5 million years to say, hey, how you doing? And another 2.5 million years for them to answer and say, I'm doing fine. How are you today? So we know their communication systems are going through a quantum entangled system that, wait for it, this is where it gets into really wild stuff, thought and consciousness. So, Neuralink's trying to do something with wires in your brain where you look at your computer. We're talking no wires, not at the speed of light, where you have devices that interface with very clear thought. It's almost like electromagnetic augmented telepathy or something like that. Very advanced stuff. And that's how they're communicating.
All right, let me ask you this. To your knowledge, is there any ET alive today and in somebody's presence or under somebody's control here on Earth?
Yeah, there's a whole group of them that have
Really?
been survived the downing. I have some men on my team that have been on the retrieval and transport teams after we knock one of these craft down. And they have confirmed that there are a number of living ones that are kept in an underground facilities. And I have requested that the president order that an operation be made to get those guys liberated. I know it sounds like science fiction. It isn't. And it's sad, because they're often tortured, and we've done horrific things. This is, I always tell people, the proof that they're not hostile is that we are continuously targeting and knocking their craft down and capturing them and torturing them.
That's what I was
If
going to
someone
ask
were
you.
to do that to us and we had way superior technology, what we're doing to Iran would look like a picnic, right? So this is where they're closer to Gandhi or Christ than they are to the way humans behave, right? They're very, very advanced civilizations. They are not violent or hostile, notwithstanding all the nonsense out of Hollywood and whatnot. But I think this is the proof of it, as I know, and many people on my team know, who I've had guys who are Delta Force guys cry with me on what they have done and how horrible. And these are top special forces people in the world that I know personally. And so, there are these sort of atrocities that we have done. And it's not as if people in Congress or the White House know about it. But they're finding out. But so this is such a huge issue to fix because we have 80 years of things having gone off the rails, right? So now we have to fix it. And, I think the time is now to do it. It's got to be fixed.
Let me ask you, the ETs that exist right now, do they seem to be coming from different places,
Yes.
in the universe? Or are they all,
Yep.
one species, so to speak?
No. They're from multiple different star systems and they work together. And there's no evidence that any of them are mean us ill. There are, how do I put this? There's the equivalent of the cosmic special forces guys who are trying to protect other worlds from us. See, people have this all backward. We're the threat. I mean, humans with the kind of technologies we have, we're the ones that are a threat to other worlds out there because of the technologies that are in these covert programs and our willingness to use them violently. So on the one hand, I'm, as an emergency doctor, I tell people, I've seen a knife used to, cut your bread, and I've seen it to cut your throat open. So it's the same tool, but what's important is what's the consciousness that wields it. So in this case, you have some covert programs that are unchecked that have a lot of sociopaths in them that are using these technologies in very dangerous ways. Now, I frankly have said in the memo and the materials to the White House and Congress, this is a much greater national security danger than China, Iran, or Russia, because you had people with that kind of technology using them against civilizations that advanced who, up till now, have shown enormous patience and forbearance. But how long that largesse will last? Because there's a universal right to self-defense. And then watch out. So I think that we have to really get this thing under control. I don't think we have 5 more years to do it. I think it needs to be done in the next few months to 2 or 3 years, which is why I made it very clear to President Trump that this is, one way or another, this is going to have to be resolved on your watch, whether you like it or not. I think we're out of time, completely out of time to fix this problem.
Out of time before what might happen?
Well, there are 3 risky scenarios. One is, I mentioned, geophysical instability that's growing because of a number of things we're doing. The second is the fact that the more we target these civilizations, we don't know at what point they're going to have to stand that capability down, right? And that would look like Independence Day or War of the Worlds, and we don't want that to happen. And the other is this false flag capability, where in the past, for psychological warfare reasons, psyops, they've engaged in using our man-made UFOs and abductions and mutilations, and all the UFO kooks say, oh my, the aliens are doing this. I go, no, they're not. I know the guys who are doing it. I have a number of them on my team who admit to doing it. And I have documents that prove we've been doing it. but we don't know at what point they're going to take that one step further and stage an alien attack on the planet that would be all human, but it would fool everyone. And I debriefed somebody in 1997 who, in the 70s, was on an interagency team. He says, yes, we can hit a button and the sky will be filled with our man-made UFOs attacking places, and everyone will think it's an alien attack. It's your classic false flag. In the Pentagon, it's called a deceptive indication and warning, or deceptive INW. That's what they're called when you do stage a false flag. And people forget, that's what the Gulf of Tonkin was. We staged this attack on our own Navy vessel so that the warmongers could expand the Vietnam War, and the public was so upset that President Johnson was stampeded into expanding that quagmire into the mess that it became. That's a fact. You can go look this up. And actually, I won't go into this too far, but 9/11 was that kind of thing. So I think that what you have here is the big one after COVID. COVID was also a big psyop. That was a biological warfare weapon for the purpose of testing to what extent they could control the masses. The big one would be this, what Wernher von Braun warned about on his deathbed. He said, he said, we are going to hoax an alien attack on the planet. It's all a lie, but it will trick and fool almost everyone. So we're trying to expose that. But see, if this festers much longer with that group that have the technologies I'm talking about, in a minute, they could stage this and it would fool. Well, it had. I mean, look at what they've been doing for decades, fooling everyone. Everyone thinks, oh, those are alien events. And, our military guys chasing these objects thinks those are military, right? Well, they're not. I mean, or alien, they're military or covert aerospace programs. So the ability to hoax an attack on our planet is real. And
what would be the goal in them doing that, staging a, really false alien attack on the entire world? What would they accomplish?
They want to unite the world around a military junta, a totalitarian system. And how do you do that? How do you get one race or one ethnicity or one nation to stop fighting with each other? You create a bigger problem up there, and it unites everyone against a common enemy. But in that uniting of the world in war instead of peace, they can then exert all manner of totalitarian controls. That has been a 70-year plan. I have a CIA document from 1953 or 54 stating that they can use the UFO issue to great advantage for its, quote, psychological warfare value. So once they got close and mastered the technology in the mid-50s, and they knew they were close to that in 53, 54, then what has happened is that they've started a long-term program to brainwash the public that there's a threat out there. Now, the question is, will they brainwash President Trump and other people? We're providing the information we have, but there are some devils on these deep state operations around the president, giving him the opposite perspective. So this is getting into like, well, which of these narratives is it going to be the true narrative or the false flag narrative? And when you have someone like the president who's very busy, and you have to do a one-sheeter for him, and he's doing a million things a day, it's very easy for people who are in the system he trusts, who are actually foxes in the henhouse, who are bad actors, for him to take their advice. And that's the problem with like Bob Bigelow, who is close to the president, who had Bigelow Aerospace. It's now defunct, but he's been saying this sort of thing to the president.
So really, right now, what you believe is Trump is the only one standing in the way of a possible phony war of the worlds, and not making that happen by exposing it.
And the only way to do it is to eliminate the element of surprise, because if you announce that we've studied this for 80 years, we have technologies, and there have been some abuses with those that have not been supervised, that we're going to stand down. And if you look at this briefing document I showed you, We have a sample speech that we've written. And I'm also providing that to people in the United Kingdom, Canada, Mexico, European Union, elsewhere. Because when all this, this is all going to come out, I think, this year. And when it does, I think people need to understand there are going to be the mainstream media, by the way, which is controlled by these interests, these sociopathic interests.
Sure.
They're going to go with only the narrative of a threat, right? That's what happens. I mean, you have to remember, anyone who tells what I'm telling you will be blacklisted off of CNN and Fox and ABC. In fact, I was on Joe Rogan's show years ago, and in order for him to get his $100 million from Spotify, he had to take my interview out of his archive. Yep. I was on Sean Ryan's show a couple years ago, and with a couple of these whistleblowers, and he got millions of views, and he was threatened, he and his entire family. And so now we're banned from the Sean Ryan show.
Wow.
That's true. I have
Well,
a
let's see.
voicemail. I have the voicemail from Sean Ryan to prove it. So the problem here is, if you know the truth and you tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, you're going to get blacklisted. And that's what's happened to us. And yet we still have this big network, and yet we have 6 documentaries out. One of them, called Unacknowledged, is the one that President Clinton has recommended to people to see. And it's on Amazon and Tubi, and you can go look at it. It's had over 850 million people see it. So I recommend people look at that, because we're trying to put out and by the way, I don't get paid to do this. I'm doing this because we know it's the right thing to do. And we only have a couple paid staff members, and we've been doing this, my wife and me, and a lot of volunteers, and a couple paid staff is all we have. And we've been doing this for 35 years.
Well, Doc, I'll tell you this. If I get threatened, this interview will be aired, obviously. And if I get threatened, it won't be the first time. So it doesn't really concern me. I mean, this
Good
is,
for you. Good for you.
yeah, this is fascinating information. It really is. I
Yeah.
put nothing past, these people. And again, we can't identify them, but,
Right.
things seem to make sense. They really do. And I appreciate you coming on.
We have identified them, and we've handed them over to law enforcement and to oversight people. Now, what they do with it, I have no official standing, but we are recommending that they be interrogated and offered immunity deals in exchange for cooperating with standing down the criminal operations. So, how this plays out, I mean, this is up to the Attorney General and the FBI Director and the President. But we have certainly given them the proof of this and who they are. And we'll just see how it plays out.
Yeah, the record of any administration releasing highly classified documents is not really good. I mean, go back to the Kennedy assassination. We still don't know what happened there, other than what you just shed light on.
Right.
So whether this is going to come out, who knows? But hopefully, at least one time, they'll let the people know what really is going on. That's what we hope for. But
Well,
Doc,
if
yeah,
not, we'll do it. Right. I'll come
yeah.
back. If they release a lot of nonsense, I'll come back on your show and share with your viewers
And
what
and
part of it.
I'll certainly invite you back. So I really appreciate this. It was fascinating, great information, and
Thank you.
let's see what our president does.
Yep. Thank you very much. It was good to see you.
All right, my friends. God, there's a lot to unpack there. Number one, let's get down to what he said. He said, definitely, there are ETs, extraterrestrials, that we have in our possession. When I say we, human beings of some sort have in their possession right now, that they have communicated with them, that they are not hostile to the earth, okay, to the human race, I should say. And if they were, he said, we would have been obliterated already. That's what he said. My thoughts on this. You hate to say that somebody just doesn't know what he's talking about. You hate to do that. I listened to the doctor, and I gave him the opportunity to say it all. I didn't interrupt him, as you see. I have a problem with it because we haven't had any real evidence yet, because it can't come out. Now, let me tell you where things start to make a little bit of sense to me. And then I'm going to go into a religious aspect on this also, but hang in there with me for a minute. He said that there's this elite group of people, okay, that really do control what's going on this planet. I liken it to the whole Epstein matter. This elite group of people, and it's all powered by money and power and prestige. That's it. But what he said is in order to unite the entire world, they would fake, they have the technology to, and they've been working on it for years, to fake an alien invasion to bring the whole world together and then put it under totalitarian rule. Is that really far-fetched? You know, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm going to be honest with you. I have to think about this. Are there forces at work, the same forces that, you know, that we can never find out who's really involved in all this Epstein matter? What he said, very, very interesting to me. He says he knows who killed Kennedy and why Kennedy got killed. I should say. He got killed because Kennedy was getting to the bottom of this whole UFO, ET, program or whatever you want to call it. He was getting to the bottom of it. And these elite people didn't want that to happen because their plan, again, is to possibly fake this phony alien attack to bring the world together under totalitarian rule. Now, it sounds like a science fiction movie. Sounds like it. But if what he's saying is true, and I don't know, he says he's delivered all this documentation to President Trump so that President Trump releases this, and somehow. Do I believe that'll happen? Why should I? I don't know. If these forces really do exist and they really do control what's going on in this world, then probably it's not going to happen. Same way we don't know what happened with Kennedy. Classified documents, 63 years, we still don't know. Epstein, we're not going to know. And I've said that many times. We're not going to know. And this is not Trump himself. This is the group of people that are controlled by this conclave or whatever you want to call them. I don't know. Very, very fascinating. But let me get to this for a minute, the religious aspect. I'm a Christian, all right? I read the Bible. Nowhere in the Bible does it say, that there's any life that exists outside of the human race because that's what God created. Now, it doesn't say there can't be or there isn't. So I don't know. I mean, if God wanted to create another race of people in a different galaxy or, universe, he can certainly do that. I don't know. As a Christian, I would have to say no. I don't believe that. But when you listen to some of the things that you say, why not? I mean, it's possible God created another race of people. Call them people. You heard what Dr. Greer said. He said they have 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. That's God. He was duplicating it. But who knows? I'm not saying yes. I'm not saying no. People, Christians, don't get mad at me and say, you know what, you're blasphemy. Don't do any of that. I'm just throwing it out there. I am not an expert in this regard. I don't pretend to be. I don't have enough knowledge. I haven't studied it. I don't know. So when a person like this comes forward who's been working on this for 33 years, I listen and I let him talk. And it's for everybody to decide. Is there some truth to this? Maybe this will stimulate to a point where you want to look into it. I don't know. Obama, I read it in the beginning, kind of slipped, said we do have ETs. And then he came back on an Instagram post and said, we're not saying that they do exist. We're saying that the possibility of them existing is there. That's what he said. He kind of cleaned it up. Who knows? People, we're not told 50% of, and maybe less than that, of what really is going on. We really don't know. But a lot of fascinating things he said. So you make of it what you make of it. I just try to bring you this information if we have a guest that's going to shed some light on certain things. And listen, I've heard in comments, many people believe there are UFOs, unidentified flying objects, and also extraterrestrial beings. A lot of people do believe that. But is it a hoax that they're playing on us to unite the world at some point? Are they going to get to that point? He said it can happen within the next 3 to 5 years. China's not the threat. Russia's not the threat. Iran is no longer a threat. It's going to be this elite conclave of people that wants to control the entire planet. So they're going to stage a phony alien invasion? I don't know. You know, he says he gave this information to President Trump and, the Pete Hegseth. So who knows? We'll have to see. But hopefully you enjoyed this. It was pretty fascinating information. We try to do the best in bringing you things that are both entertaining and informative. So hope you enjoyed it. My friends, how do I always leave you the same way? Never going to change. Be safe. Read something every day that just kind of frightens me. And I don't scare that easy. But, a lot of stuff going on in this world, people, in this country. So please be safe. Know your surroundings. Be healthy. Peptides, that's the new thing. I'm actually going, for they're going to do my blood and tell me what peptides I should be on. My wife wants me to be on anti-aging peptides. Why not? I'm hearing some good things about it. I'm also doing red light therapy. Why not? It's supposed to be helpful. You only got one life to live. You may as well do your best. Eat right. Get some exercise. Don't do anything that's going to hurt you. And whatever advantage you can get by some of the technology and the medications that they have out there today, why not? Give it a shot. Do your research, make sure it's safe, and give it a shot. So be safe, be healthy. And yes, people, God bless each and every one of you, your families, your friends, your neighborhoods, and your loved ones. And God bless America, and God bless this entire world. Let's try to get it together. Humans have a difficult time in doing that. We're so fractured in so many ways, but maybe, something, not a war of the worlds, a phony war of the worlds to unite us. But, I know our God can do some amazing things, but it's up to us to believe in him. See you next time. Take care. If I haven't invited you already, I'm inviting you now to our school platform, our membership platform. You're going to really benefit from it. I'm telling you, you're going to get a lot of me. I put courses in there on business, on negotiation, on leadership. We do Zoom calls a couple of times a month. We even do Bible studies. I hold Q&As for all of you that are interested in the mob life or anything else that you think I might be able to help you with. But more than that, it's a community of like-minded people that are really benefiting one another. People are doing business with one another. They're becoming friends. It's just a great platform. It's something that we're missing, I believe, this sense of community. We're missing it in this country, and we're trying to bring it back. So I invite you, and I got to tell you this is an offer you really shouldn't refuse. Go on these platforms. They're going to charge you an arm and a leg. We charge $10 a month. And really, that's just to maintain everything that we do there. We want you in there. We want you to enjoy it. And we want you to feel that sense of community again. So if you want more of me, go to michaelfrancis.com/family, an offer you shouldn't refuse.